IVM.
News Kids on the Block. We bring to you stories that top the nation's papers. Fresh from the IVM and SN International School Desk. Hi, I'm Kavya.
I'm Anya.
And I'm Trivik.
And welcome to this episode of News Kids on the Block, where we give you all the top news updates of the week. And this is our 35th episode, so yay.
Woohoo! I don't know about you, but I'm feeling 35.
Also, isn't it like almost 7 years of IVM today? Or in a few days?
It is. This coming Tuesday, it will officially mark 7 years of IVM. And that's certainly something to celebrate, don't you think?
Indeed, Trivik. I will take us into the first story for today, which is a new climate change report that was released by the Intergovernmental Panel on, it's the second one of the three major climate review reports, and it's written by 270 authors from 67 countries. While the information we have isn't something new and something that we haven't heard before, though it's more detailed and we have more precise statistics, I guess. So I thought I'd take us through some of the key points and some of the major concerns that were in this report and just summarize it for you guys. So I'll just go very quickly. So the world's 150 biggest cities have seen a 500% increase in extreme heat since the year 1980. And it is found that, especially in areas, subtropical regions of Asia, climate change has a very huge effect on the increase in diseases like malaria and dengue, which are waterborne and vector-borne. And deaths each year from these climate-related illnesses, such as extreme heat exposure and stuff like that, will increase by 250,000 within the next 30 years, which is very concerning. Another really concerning point is that as much as 14% of species are facing a high risk of extinction due to climate change. So in less than a century, the losses would equal the number of species driven to extinction by human activities over the last 12,000 years. And specifically looking at India, it shows that Mumbai is at a very high risk of sea level rise and flooding. And Ahmedabad faces serious danger of becoming an urban heat island. Patna and Lucknow are expected to exceed wet bulb temperatures of 35 degrees Celsius, which is a life-threatening mix of heat and humidity. And most of the Indian states and cities could reach very dangerous levels by the end of the century. And by 2050, around 35 million people in India could face annual coastal flooding, and 40% of the population will live with water scarcity. So that is definitely, those are the main points that I thought I should highlight, and definitely brings up a lot of concern. Like I said, it's not like we didn't know this stuff. It's just that every day it's becoming more real, and every day it's becoming something that we need to focus on more and make more change for. So yeah, just some very concerning news. I will hand it over to Trivik for the next story.
Our next story for you today is coming from Australia, where the Australian government have ordered 200,000 people to flee floods moving towards Sydney. So Australia's emergency services have ordered 200,000 people to flee from the path of a wild storm that lurched towards Sydney Thursday after killing 13 people in more than a week of record-setting floods along the east coast. Authorities issued severe rain and wind warnings for a 400-kilometer, that's 250 miles, stretch of coast as water levels rose rapidly, including in suburbs around Sydney, Australia's largest city and home to 5 million people. So this storm has really taken over a lot of different parts of Australia, and it is forcing people out of their houses into high ground where they can hopefully get some shelter. And there are helicopter rescues and boat rescues underway. However, it's crazy to see how Sydney is now down under.
Well, I guess you could say the storm has taken people by storm.
And with that, we will take a short break and we'll be back on News Kids on the Block.
Have you ever wondered where the business world is headed? How the ways in which we create, market and sell to consumers will evolve? Or if we'll ever go back to wearing pants while working? For answers to all of this and more, tune into Advertising is Dead with me, Varun Dugirala. Every Tuesday, as I talk to entrepreneurs, leaders and change makers from across business, media, marketing and beyond. You can catch all episodes of Advertising is Dead on the IVM Podcasts website, app or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Welcome back to News Kids on the Block. I'm your co-host Trivik Hariharan, and our next story for you is from Anya.
Thanks, Trivik. The next story that we have for you is some very sad news coming from Ukraine, where on the 1st of March, which was a Tuesday, amidst Russia and Ukraine's tensions and Russia's attack on Ukraine, an Indian student was very unfortunately killed during a shelling. He was a 21-year-old named Naveen Shekharappa, and he was a final year medical student from Haveri in Karnataka. and he died as Russian soldiers blew up a government building on the 1st of March. The External Affairs Ministry tweeted that with profound sorrow, we confirm that an Indian student has lost his life in shelling in Kharkiv this morning. The ministry is in touch with his family. We convey our deepest condolences to the family. I believe that Prime Minister Narendra Modi also spoke to the student's father and called for a meeting to discuss the situation in with Russia and Ukraine yet again. Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla said that he was, and I quote, calling in the ambassador of Russia and Ukraine to reiterate India's demand for urgent safe passage for Indian nationals who are still in Kharkiv and cities in other conflict zones. And other sources said that it is imperative that Russia and Ukraine respond to the need for safe passage, according to NDTV. Obviously, India has a very sensitive political situation here because they can't really get involved either way. And so I think that as a country, we focused more on just ensuring that all of these students and other nationals that are in Ukraine right now are being able to make it home safely. Naveen Shekharappa was standing in a queue outside a grocery store when he was hit, and she called his phone. She was a student coordinator. Someone named Pruja Praharaj, who was a student coordinator in Kharkiv, called his phone, and a Ukrainian woman picked up his phone and she said that basically the owner of this phone is being taken to the morgue. And I think that that's just so heartbreaking to hear. And this entire situation in Ukraine has just caused a lot of grief for a lot of different people. I think Kavya will be talking a little bit more about some details about it. So I'll pass it over to her.
Yeah, just to add on to what Anya said, just to give you guys a bit of a summary about what's happening there over the past few days. The Russia's invasion on Ukraine hasn't made that much progress over the last few days. The cities of Kharkiv, Chernihiv, and Mariupol remain in the hands of Ukraine. Meanwhile, the UN General Assembly voted on Wednesday at an emergency session, and they demanded an immediate halt to Moscow's attack on Ukraine. India, however, abstained on the resolution, and they restated that the differences between Russia and Ukraine can only be solved through dialogue and diplomacy. And like Naveen Shekharappa, there are hundreds and thousands of students, Indian students, stuck in Ukraine in a very, very dangerous and scary situation. And India launched an operation called Operation Ganga that is set to bring home the hundreds of students that are stuck in Ukraine and have no way of getting out. And I really hope that nothing like this happens again and that all students and everyone, all the Indians that are stuck in Ukraine are guaranteed safety. With that, we'll take a short break and we'll be right back on News Kids on the Block.
Hello. It's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Cyrus Says His Cock and Bull, Cyrus has a great time with comedians Puneet Pania and Abhijit Ganguly. Check it out as he shares stories of his hilarious encounters with Amitabh Bachchan. On The Wire Talk, Siddharth talks to author G.N. Devi about his latest book, Mahabharata, The Epic and the Nation. On Postcards from Nowhere, Utsav tells us an intriguing story of the cities, their connection to limes and Benazir Bhutto. The Pulyabazi hosts talk to Nihar Shah, assistant professor at Carnegie Mellon University. They discuss how to distinguish between good science and pseudoscience. And on Ikaduka Economy, Abhinav and Dr. Junjunwala break down how interest rates are determined for loans. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. It really helps us. Don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms that you're listening to. And also remember, you can check us out on YouTube at www.ivmpodcast.com/YouTube. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, SBI Life Insurance, Bank of Baroda, and HDFC Life Insurance. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back to News Kids on the Block. I'm your co-host Trivik Hariharan, and our next story for you today is something which makes me very, very happy. This weekend, we saw Liverpool take on Roman Abramovich's, or now maybe formerly Roman's, Chelsea team and Thomas Tuchel's Chelsea team in the Carabao Cup final. This game was one of the most entertaining 0-0 draws you'll ever see, with a ton of offside goals, fights even between players. However, in the end, the game was settled in a penalty shootout where Liverpool scored all 11 of their penalties. That means all 11 players that they fielded, including their goalkeeper, scored their penalties. However, Chelsea only scored 10, with their goalkeeper Kepa Arrizabalaga missing the crucial penalty, which gave Liverpool the title.
Wow, Trivik, I'm so happy for you and Liverpool. The next story we have for you today is a movie review by yours truly. I actually went and watched a movie like not on Netflix and when it released. And I've been waiting for this movie for a really, really long time. And despite hearing a lot of mixed reviews, I was not at all disappointed. And the movie that I'm talking about is Gangubai Kathiyawadi. So based off of a book, and chapter 12 of a book specifically, this movie talks about the life and times of Gangubai Kathiyawadi, who essentially rose to fame as like sort of becoming like the Don, and she's becoming a really powerful and formative figure of in Kamathipura as a brothel madam. And she was sold into the brothel at the age of like 16 or something like that for 500 rupees. And she rose through the ranks and she fought really hard for the rights of education for children who were brought up in that area, as well as for prostitutes in general. And I thought that it was just a really well-made film. Like, it was funny. Some of the dialogues were beautiful. The music, actually, just on its own, the music was so like lively and vivacious. And Alia Bhatt did a really good job in the role for the most part as well. It had a really interesting cast, and there's just not a lot to complain about. I felt like it even did like reasonably authentic in terms of like the book and the stuff that you read about the real Gangubai as well. I think like there was an article by the Quint which kind of talked about a few opportunities where Sanjay Leela Bhansali could have dramatized the film and they chose not to. And they had a couple of different ones, but one of the ones that article talked about was when she goes to meet Jawaharlal Nehru. He asks her like, why couldn't you become, just like an ordinary gharwali? And she says, would you make me your gharwali? And obviously Nehru is like so taken aback, and like rather unobviously actually Nehru is like offended by this, and she just very simply states like, see, that's sort of the problem, or like, I don't really want to marry you, I just wanted to prove a point. And I think that says so much about the life that she lives, and this like sort of very open, mysterious, thought to be very dark and gruesome and horrific underworld of the world, but it really is a reality of how our world functions. And I feel like this movie was just a very small step in seeing that through a different lens. So I really, really enjoyed the movie. And I hope you will too.
Anyways, that's all we have for you today. We hope you enjoyed this episode of News Kids on the Block. Don't forget to tune in to us every Friday for our fresh take on the news from across the globe.
If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other podcasts on the IVM network.
You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcast on Twitter and Instagram.
We'll see you next week. But till then, do share this episode with your folks. Stay safe. And don't forget to do your homework.
Love fighting?
We've got you covered.
Check out our show, The Fighting Goat, where we, the voices of the internet, Arjun Chipalkatti and Somesh Kamra, bring to you crazy weekly action on your favorite combat show, The Fighting Goat.
Be it commentary, breakdown, predictions, analysis of styles and techniques.
And of course, your round of favorite fighters.
You can listen to us every Thursday on the IVM Podcast app, website, and all major podcast streaming platforms.
Are you looking for finance products and services that can enhance your personal finance experience? Are you looking for a space to talk about your financial product or service? And are you looking for a crisp talk show where the conversation is all about money? Well, your search ends here. Hi, my name is Anupam Gupta and I'm host of the Paisa Paisa podcast, and I invite you for the conversation about your personal finance on each Monday on the IVM Podcast app or the website or on any podcast streaming platforms. See you folks.